NAQT, National Academic Quiz Tournaments. NAQT welcomes you to this recorded webinar, an introduction to online quiz bowl tournaments for organizers, tournament directors, and game officials. This recording frequently references NAQT's online tournament guide, which is available on our website. Follow along at naqt.com/online. Additionally, a companion recorded webinar aimed at coaches and players is also available. Now, here's NAQT's Chief Technical Officer, Robert Hentzel.
Okay, I would like to welcome everybody here to NAQT's webinar on hosting online quiz bowl tournaments. I will be your presenter this evening. My name is Robert Hentzel, and I'm NAQT's Chief Technical Officer. In that role as Chief Technical Officer, I've worked pretty closely with my colleagues at NAQT and with other groups in the quiz bowl world to develop our online tournament guide. I've also run 6 real online tournaments this competition year, and I've done a large number of experimental games that are designed to test various ideas about what is the right way to do things. So I've scanned the list of registrants right before I started the webinar, and I was really thrilled to see people from people that I recognized from schools in 30 states, and also representatives of at least 4 state activities associations. We have more than 100 participants, and hopefully a lot of other people will watch the recorded versions that we will make available later. They might even get more out of it because my colleagues will have a chance to edit out all of my jokes from the final production. But I'm enthused by that amount of interest because we really hope that we can help make online tournaments more and more of a success than they already have been this year. This is the first of 2 webinars that NAQT is going to be doing about online quiz bowl. The target audience for this one is tournament directors and, to a lesser extent, tournament staffers, moderators, and scorekeepers who want to know how the events are going to be structured that they're helping out at. The second webinar, which will be this Sunday, December 13th at 3 p.m. Central Time, will really be focused on coaches and players who are attending online tournaments. The general plan for tonight is I'm going to spend about 45 minutes going over the most important aspects of NAQT's online tournament guide, and then answer questions for the final 15 minutes. Okay, so why would you want to watch this webinar rather than just reading the online guide? Well, the online guide is very detailed. There's a lot of information in there, but people have told us that it can be a bit of a chore. So the point of this webinar is to really call out the important points on some of the principles that we think can lead to good decision-making by tournament directors, and also do it more explaining of why NAQT made the choices that it did. And I will use screen share to show myself using some of the tools like buzzin.live and the online question system to hopefully bring in an immediacy or a visual element to what's going on that may be more useful than just reading about it. That said, everything I talk about tonight should be somewhere in the online tournament guide. But before I start, I should emphasize that we titled the online tournament guide a guide very explicitly. There is essentially nothing in that guide that is an absolute requirement to run an online tournament. There are lots of ways to accomplish these ends, and what we are doing is we are merely presenting what we think is the best way to go about it, the way that best balances the experience that players will have with the work that the tournament director needs to do. You can probably make a tournament work with just about anything, and so you should not worry about telling NAQT that you aren't following this guide. We are not going to be insulted by any of that. And in fact, if you're not following it at all or not following parts of it, you should probably tell us that in our communications, just so we don't assume otherwise and make a subpar recommendation. So there's nothing here that's absolutely required to run a tournament, and there are no new requirements for running a tournament when you're using NAQT questions that are specific to it being online. Obviously, NAQT has requirements for using its questions that are for all tournaments, but there's nothing that's new to it being online. There is one pretty significant requirement for online tournaments that's necessary for the event to be a qualifier for nationals. And I will get to that later. Okay, so in preparing for this, I made a couple of outlines of how I wanted to address the various issues. And when I looked at the different ones, it seemed like there were 3 really important principles that kept coming up over and over that were really important to communicate and really informed NAQT's thinking as it developed these ideas. And so I think I'm going to start by going over those principles because honestly, if you listen to those and then promptly fall asleep, or your internet conks out, or you just forget everything else you hear, I'm going to consider it a success. I think I will have given you 3 important things to think about when you're structuring your tournament that will really improve it. The first is the most concrete, and that is that online tournaments take more time. I can't say that the pandemic has brought very many good things to Quiz Bowl. One thing that it has brought is that with tournaments using our online question system have given us really hard data on how long matches take to play. For example, if you're running a tournament using our official online rules, which is 20 toss-up bonus cycles, the mean average game in our database took 34 minutes of gameplay. In contrast, the mean average start-to-start times, that is for any given team, the difference between when one round starts, and when their next round starts is 44 minutes. So that's longer because it includes time to go navigate to the right room, time waiting for your opponent, that sort of thing. And these distributions are not symmetrical. The longest games are longer than the mean by more than the shortest games are shorter than the mean. So there's a longer tail out to the right. So if you're running standard NAQT format matches and you have moderators of average skill, numerically, the odds are against you if you think you can schedule games for less than 45 minutes apart on average. By comparison, like at NAQT's national championships, we tend to assume a start-to-start time of 35 minutes. And that's with teams needing to possibly move across a large hotel and with gameplay that's limited to 21 to 25 minutes. And you might say, hey, that doesn't align with NAQT's games being timed. That's true. That's because gameplay in this case would also count time during halftime, time during timeouts, time during score checks, things like that when the clock would not normally be running. And this, 44 minutes start to start, 34 minutes of game time, that is for the average game in our database. Games with inexperienced players and staff will probably take longer. So what's the good news there? That week by week, as we look at these stats, the average time is going down. And if we look at moderator experience versus game time, the games also get shorter. So people do get better at this. There's value to experience, and it strongly suggests that it might be worthwhile to have actual online practice sessions with your moderators if you can swing that. So in short, when you're laying out the schedule for your event, it's tempting to want to do it the same way an in-person tournament would be run. I think that sort of schedule will take too long. You probably need to start your tournament earlier, run your tournament later, offer fewer games, run shorter games, or maybe even change your rules in some dramatic fashion to make things go faster. I don't know what the right answer is going to be for any particular tournament. For me personally, for the events that I run in, quote, in, unquote, Minnesota, I have generally opted to go with offering fewer games in each tournament. Second is the paramount importance of audio quality. Right at the beginning of the competition year, NAQT did a whole series of mock games using different technologies and different rules to try to figure out what works best. And part of that was just asking the players after the game what their subjective experience of the game was. And the biggest factor that we could figure out from people's enjoyment and their desire to play was the audio and the network quality provided by the video conferencing software. So audio quality is a fairly wide-ranging and not super well-defined term, but broadly speaking, I mean clear audio that doesn't jar you when you listen to it, that doesn't have compression artifacts, and it is delivered with low latency so you don't have delays or jumps or choppiness in the audio. Basically, can the players understand the questions, even given that this is Quiz Bowl questions tend to have complicated structures and a lot of rarely used words. And you might, be sort of putting your hand on your forehead there and saying, well, that actually sounds really obvious. But my real point is not that you have to hear what's being said. It's just the degree to which this property really transcends everything else that goes into evaluating the success of a match. So in our tests, we could have a lot of things go wrong. A lot of mistakes get made, or a lot of things be cumbersome to set up. But if the audio quality was strong, the game was well received by the players. So we basically took that and we ran with that. And we let that drive a lot of other decisions we made about what we wanted to recommend. I'll come back to a lot of those later on in this seminar. But for now, I guess what I'd like to emphasize is that if you're sitting down as a tournament director and saying, I'd rather you do X to get benefit Y, but it might degrade the audio quality, I really urge you to say, I'm not going to do X, even though it's inconvenient, or Y would be really nice. There's very little that's worth compromising the audio quality of a tournament. And the third principle is even more vague than the last one, but it's the importance of staying in communication with everybody. The most vibrant memory I have of the first online tournament that I ran, when I did not really anticipate this problem because it didn't come up with the smaller scale test games we were running, though it seems obvious in retrospect, is how out of touch I felt sitting at home running things. That at an in-person event in the control room, you have moderators coming by every 30 minutes and you can ask them how it's going. You can give them announcements. Or if they don't come by, then their room is behind. They can pass along player complaints. And if you have to go track down a team because for any reason, you have a schedule telling you a physical room where they are, it's trivial to find that room and go and grab them. And so I don't want to say that an in-person tournament doesn't need good communication, or that it's always trivial to communicate with teams at an in-person event. But in general, I found it's a lot more forgiving. If you have to find somebody to talk to them, you can, and at worst, there's a bit of a delay. With an online event, I found that it can be much harder and much slower to get in touch with the people that you want. And some of the channels you have available to you, like email, you don't even know if they've received the message. So what's the takeaway? Essentially, this is something that needs clear and detailed plans in advance for how you're going to communicate with teams and staff. For instance, for teams, at what points in the schedule do you have to communicate with them? Is there a point at which you're moving from prelim games to a playoff bracket? How are they going to get that playoff bracket? If you're going to email it out, the coaches need to know to expect that and to share it with their players. Is there a point in your schedule where there might be tiebreakers and you might have to grab random teams and put them in rooms that you choose right then? How are you going to communicate with them? The coaches need to know to expect a communication right about that time. So you should make a list of these points when you'll need to communicate with coaches, tell coaches to expect them, and how they should expect to receive the information. And then make it clear to them that they need to pass that information along to the players. A lot of this stuff, it is just as important for the players to be aware of it as the coach. And on the flip side, do everything you can to make it easy for coaches and players to get in touch with you. Give out your email address. If you want to make a fake, or if you might get a supplemental email address to hand out instead, that's fine. Every logistical document that you make and distribute, like the schedule, put your contact information on it, even if it doesn't seem like it logically would go there. You want anybody in the tournament who has any scrap of communication from you to be able to use it to get in touch with you if they don't know what's going on. Just sort of imagine yourself in the mindset of a confused high schooler at their first tournament, and they're not sure they're joining the right Zoom room or not, or maybe they came late and they don't know what round the tournament's in. Maybe they'll try to contact their teammates or their coach, but they might be in a game or they might not be checking email. They should have an easy way to get in touch with you so that you can help them out. The general approach that I use for this is I make a Google Sheet that is a spreadsheet, so I can edit it online but still have everybody at the tournament view it. And I use it as a combination schedule and announcement board. I hand out the link, the view link to coaches, tell them to give it to their players, and then I put the prelim schedule there and tell them when to expect announcements. If I have unexpected announcements, I put them at the top of the schedule in red and shift the actual schedule down to hopefully make it obvious in between games when players go there to find out where the Zoom meeting for their next room, that they'll see the announcement. I also use the online question system to put unexpected announcements into the pre and post game instructions for certain rounds so that moderators will see it to read it. And then I also, so that's for communicating with teams. For moderators, I set up a chat channel that everyone should join. I use Slack, but you can use Discord. You can use basically any chat system except Zoom chat, because you can only be part of one Zoom meeting at a time. And then just moderators are on that, and I encourage them to use that to report issues that teams are having, to report protests that they occur, pretty much any communication that needs to go back and forth. I didn't do that for my first tournament, and it really affected my ability to know what was going on. I got a question here. What is Slack? Slack is essentially it's a big chat room, but one that is targeted at businesses. If you have a bunch of teams, bunch of people communicating on projects, they would use it as a chat room. If you use Discord, well, both of them would probably be irritated to this, but basically the same thing. All right, so I guess I've rambled a bit there on my 3 key points, but honestly, I think those 3 ideas drove the thinking that created the rest of the ideas I'm going to talk about in this seminar. So to reiterate, games are going to take longer. Audio quality is the most important thing. And really thinking in advance about how you're going to communicate with teams and when you will need to communicate with them are key. And maybe I'd add a meta point to those 3, and that is that hands-on exposure to these tools helps an incredible amount. No one should be, so this is the tournament director seminar, so no one should be reading a game without having participated in a Zoom meeting. People should experiment with their audio settings before. Moderators should look at the electronic score sheet. They should create a buzzin.live room. They should do the tutorial for the online question system. Maybe this all seems obvious, but my experience has been that all of this dramatically helps. The first bit of exposure to these tools goes a long way toward making people comfortable with them and making them able to help with running an efficient and enjoyable tournament. Okay, so enough about these sort of vague overarching principles. How would an online quiz bowl match actually work? So, according to our guide, instead of having a physical game room with tables and chairs where people gather to play, that's replaced with a Zoom meeting that lasts the entirety of the competition. So instead of saying, oh, this is room 200, we'll have this game room is the Zoom meeting with URL such and such. Moderators and scorekeepers get assigned to a single Zoom meeting in the same way that they'd be assigned to a single game room. You say, all right, so at this tournament, Roger and Sarah, you're going to be staffing this Zoom meeting. They'll start the meeting and they will be in that meeting for the entirety of the day, just like they would be in, say, room 200 at an in-person tournament. They stay there and the teams will come in and out, going from Zoom meeting, based on where they're going to play next. From the player's point of view, you as the tournament director will make them a schedule that shows the rooms, that is the Zoom meeting in which they're going to play. They will look at the schedule and say, okay, we're going into round 1. That is the Zoom meeting with this URL. We all click that on the schedule. We all join. We play our game. When we're done, we go back to the schedule. We find where we're supposed to go for room 2, and we go there. So as a tournament director, you can plan the schedule basically in the normal way you would for an in-person tournament. And then once that is done, you add another column to it, which has a Zoom link for each room. So I have a sample schedule here that I made for my most recent tournament, which I'm just going to quickly share. And so here you can see that there's sort of the normal stuff at the top with the name of the tournament, the date, and so on. And then there are the rounds going across, the teams that are playing in each round. And over at the left, this room 1 through room 5, those are hyperlinks to the Zoom meeting. So all the team members need to do is click on that and they'll be taken to the right Zoom meeting. Down below, there's some basic instructions. And then there is the link to the pre-tournament atrium, the playoff bracket stats link, basically places that people might need to go from here. And down at the bottom, my email address in case they need to get in touch with me. So that is a basic schedule. So when players have joined the Zoom room, they will also then join a buzzin.live room. And buzzin.live is a separate website that replaces the buzzer system for these tournaments. That can either be done on the same computer or it can be done on the player's smartphone. A lot of players have said that it really feels a lot more natural to use their phone for this. That's fine. We'll talk more about buzzin.live later, in particular the question of, why would you need to introduce this separate site? Why is that motivated? So the moderator reading questions will access the questions directly from NAQT's website using the online question system. So instead of having a paper printout or a PDF of the questions, the system will display the questions one cycle at a time. So a toss-up and a bonus to minimize scrolling and the chance of accidentally reading the wrong question, and to also track exactly which questions each team has heard. I want to emphasize here, because I've gotten a lot of questions about this, that this is not the same thing as NAQT's Lock Lizard system. Lock Lizard is a way to distribute practice material as encrypted PDFs. This is a system that is custom built to deliver questions to a moderator in the context of a tournament in a maximally efficient form for reading. And later on, we'll actually see the online question system in action. That I'll log into it and step through a game to show you what that looks like. So in the game itself, the moderator reads questions aloud and answers are given aloud. None of this is typed. Essentially, play testers said that it is incredibly important to maintain that aspect of the game. And in addition, it maintains many of the traditions of the game surrounding answer correctness. Typing answers introduces an enormous host of problems with judging, like just how many spelling errors and typos are allowed before the answer is wrong. I hope most of you are familiar with with NAQT's online buzzword game, where questions are read to you online and then you type in the answer. That's great. It's a lot of fun, but it is really tricky to judge some of these slightly misspelled answers that people put in, and it would be very difficult for moderators to consistently do that. So even just setting aside tradition, it makes a significant improvement in the judging process to have the game remain audio. And again, this feeds into another reason why the audio quality is just so important. So the scorekeeper, who may also be the moderator, will track the scores using an online spreadsheet. Essentially, this is a Google sheet that looks like a traditional score sheet, and you enter 10s and 15s and bonus points into it. Another point on the very short list of benefits is that this system basically eliminates arithmetic errors from the score sheets. So it should be easier to find people who are willing to act as scorekeepers. And then finally, except for a very few changes for rules, NAQT has kept its rules the same for online games. We'll go over those small rule changes at the end, but they are, in fact, they were relegated to the end of this webinar because they are, in the aggregate, really so minor. So overall, individual games, very much like traditional in-person quiz bowl. You have teams, there's 2 teams in a room, the moderator reads questions, the players speak their answers. Okay, I have some questions about Zoom popping up here, so I'm gonna move on to talking about Zoom. And so I guess so. First of all, very quickly, why Zoom? We tried a bunch of video conferencing systems, and we thought Zoom had the best audio network quality, and that pretty much was the end of it. That we are sticking by our ideal that audio quality is of critical importance, and we thought Zoom was generally better and often very much better than other possibilities. As a sub point, the waiting room feature that Zoom provides, and most other video conferencing systems don't, is also very convenient for the way Quiz Bowl is typically organized. Here I've been delaying answering a question that was asked, which is how do you avoid people entering a room before the game is finished? And the answer is Zoom waiting rooms. That essentially, when you go to join a game room, you're added to a list of people who want to join, and then the moderator will admit you. So if you finish your round 1, you can go directly to your round 2 URL without needing to know the status of that game. If it's done, you'll go directly into the room, or if it's done, the moderator will admit you. If the game is not done, you'll be in the waiting room, and you'll be told explicitly that you're waiting to be admitted. And then when the round is done, the moderator will just admit the players that are waiting. So it ends up being very conveniently not allowing players to enter a room in the middle of a game, possibly distracting things. Or if you're running a tournament where it would be a question security violation for them to be in there, then they won't be. Works out well. Okay, so I do want to not be a Zoom shill and say that Zoom is not the best thing out there when you evaluate video conferencing systems by other metrics. In particular, managing users and licenses can be a pain. It's not free, or at least the free version has its drawbacks. And it's trickier to write bots that work with Zoom automatically to do things like move players between rooms. All of that's true, but in our opinion, it was outweighed by the superior audio quality. Zoom meetings can be free, but the free rooms are generally limited to 40 minutes. There's some exceptions to that now for schools. I don't know how long that will last, and I don't know the exact degree to which programs can take advantage of that. Some tournaments are successfully running events using the free rooms, either because they have very short games, or they just say, well, when the room runs out, we'll start another one, or by allocating one game room for each half. All of these used to run successful tournaments. Our recommendation is that it is worth paying for the Zoom license, paying for a professional Zoom account in the name of simplicity, so that you can have one URL for each room throughout the tournament, and you don't have to worry about the game room abruptly ending in the middle of some critical portion of gameplay, because at least under standard NAQT rules, you can't count on nearly all of your games being done in 40 minutes. Probably a significant fraction of them won't be. I don't want to talk too much about configuring Zoom because they're a large company and have spent lots of money on elaborate online documentation that covers most issues pretty well. But I did want to address some basic things. The first thing is that what NAQT recommends is that each game room is a separate Zoom tournament, is a separate Zoom meeting. Specifically, it is not a breakout room from a single larger meeting. Breakout rooms have advantages, and I know tournaments have been successfully run using them. Among those advantages is that it's easier for somebody to automatically grab players and move them automatically from one breakout room to the next. Also, typically, it will cost less to have one large meeting and several breakout rooms in it. But the breakout rooms they lack waiting rooms. So once you're in the meeting as a whole, there's no sort of waiting rooms just for the breakout rooms. And at least for the tournaments that I've run, having enough central control room staff to move potentially hundreds of players around has proven difficult to do efficiently. That said, I think there are successful strategies that use a small number, possibly just one large Zoom meeting with breakout rooms within it. That's not how I run my tournaments, and it's not what NAQT recommends, but it is a plausible way to do it. So I did get 2 questions about that. I know that my answer was a little bit wishy-washy, but in short, I don't think it's the absolute best way to do it, but it is definitely a way that can be made to work and that I know has worked. There also have been tournaments where it was specifically blamed that it just took too long for the control room people to move players in between games accurately and efficiently, and it was a real slowdown. Another thing is that Zoom confusingly has a separate product called Zoom Rooms. You do not want Zoom Rooms. I'm trying to be very careful to always say Zoom meetings in this webinar and to use the language on the online tournament guide. You don't want Zoom Rooms. Don't enter your credit card information to purchase Zoom Rooms for the purchase of playing Quiz Bowl. I'll talk about this a little bit more with buzzin.live, but we do not recommend using Zoom chat for players to actually buzz. In theory, this seems like it should work. You open the chat window, people type buzz or just type B or something like that. But we tried this a lot, but in practice, we found that moderators who were focused on reading a complicated paragraph from another window or on paper just could not keep a sufficiently close eye on the chat window. That some could, but a lot of times they didn't notice the buzz and would just keep reading, which created a situation that was very difficult to resolve a protest over. So don't use Zoom chat for buzzing. All right, equipment. If you're going to play an online Quiz Bowl, everyone needs a webcam, everyone needs a microphone, everyone needs Zoom installed, and everyone needs an internet connection. Those all seem pretty obvious. We go over them in much greater detail in the online guide. And really, this particular subject is much better suited for the online guide where it can cite sort of numbers and stats and things like that. So I'm going to direct you there if you have questions about that. But I did want to talk about 3 specific points with regard to the equipment that you need. The first is, I just think as a rule, if you're a tournament director, your moderators need to have headsets. And when I say headset, I'm going to use that inclusively for either an actual headset like this that I'm wearing that has headphones and an integrated microphone, or headphones and a quality external microphone. So not the microphone that's built into a laptop. So when I say headset, I mean either of those 2 things. I'm going to say headset for expediency. This is, I think, the baseline equipment that a moderator needs to deliver quality audio without feedback and without background noise. For my local tournaments, if a moderator doesn't have a headset, I just buy them one instead of arguing about it. It's The moderator is the person doing most of the talking and conveying most of the complex ideas that need to be conveyed. Their audio needs to be as good as possible. I would not let a staffer without a headset moderate at one of my tournaments. Players, I think, really should have headsets. I've gotten pushback from some of this on people. But ultimately, I got trusted to run this webinar, so I'm going to emphasize this. I think players having headsets make the game more enjoyable for everybody involved. They eliminate the background noise that distracts you or everybody else in the room. They eliminate feedback. So feedback is when the sound coming out of your speakers is picked up by your own microphone. So everybody else in your room hears what they're saying delayed and distorted by a bit. And so I don't like the idea of ever saying, hey, if you're going to play Quiz Bowl, you need to buy this product. Generally, I think we want to reduce the costs of participation and make it as easy for people to join as possible. In this case, I really think players should have a headset, sorry, and that this should be emphasized in tournament announcements. Quality headset is $20 to $40, and you can of course use it for all of your other online activities. Can you play without a headset? Yes. I wouldn't prohibit a player from playing without a headset, but they would probably need to play on push to talk, so that if they want to give their answer, they need to push a key on their keyboard to enable their audio stream. And in general, I think it's very common for people in online meetings to not perceive that they are causing a problem, even a minor distraction for everybody else, because they aren't hearing it. And having headsets has positive externalities in that way. Lastly, I've worked with a lot of local students who reported that they were having trouble consistently playing online tournaments because their internet wasn't very good, or they had bad internet. There's a huge number of things that can go wrong with networks, but it's been very common in my experience that the real problem is that people's local Wi-Fi router, that their local Wi-Fi access is spotty, and their ISP is actually fine. So if you have players or moderators that are reporting bad internet, then I guess the second thing to try after telling to have everybody else in their house stop using the internet while they're reading is just to connect to the router with an Ethernet cable instead of Wi-Fi. Even if you need like a 60-foot or an 80-foot or some ludicrously long Ethernet cable, it's going to be more reliable and give better quality than Wi-Fi. If your Wi-Fi is good, great. If it's spotty, try using an Ethernet cable. I say there's a considerable chance that it makes a significant difference. All right, I have a question here jumping back to Zoom. If I have a Zoom educator account, is the plan for me to make Zoom links for all the rooms and the moderators just zoom into that link? Do I make them co-hosts of all the Zoom meetings? Would that make it possible for each tournament room to go over 40 minutes since I have the account that allows that? So I have talked with a bunch of local schools that have Zoom accounts here in Minnesota, and it seems like, well, I don't have an absolutely perfect answer to this. I think because it seems like the licenses that schools have differ in some of their details. If you have a Zoom account that allows you to make a whole bunch of simultaneous meetings and then assign them to other alternate hosts, then yes, that is a fine way to go about things, and it should work perfectly. And those meetings should be able to go over 40 minutes. The ProZoom account that I have does not allow me to create multiple simultaneous meetings. It assumes I can only run one at once. So what I do is I tell all of my moderators to create their meeting, that they are users on my ProZoom account. They make the meeting the day before the tournament. They send me the links. I put the link in the spreadsheet. As a plus, that saves me a bit of time from actually having to create all the links. But either way, you end up with a bunch of Zoom meetings, each of which has a unique link. But if you can create them all yourself, then that, according to your school's license, then that is great. Okay, so buzzin.live. Why do you need a buzzer system replacement? So we talked about this a bit. Zoom chat, the lack of sound makes it problematic. Asking players to say buzz in practice, the moderator just can't figure out who said buzz first. Zoom has a raise hands feature that seems designed for this sort of thing, but again, the lack of sound means that it doesn't work. And as best as I can tell, Zoom chat doesn't care about correcting for network lag when displaying chat messages. Whichever one gets to the server first is going to be sent out to all of the clients first, and that's fine for a typical Zoom meeting. It is not ideal for adjudicating buzzes. So NAQT recommends buzzin.live, which is basically a separate website that players log in to buzz. So I'll briefly show you how this works. So buzzin.live website, I'm acting as a moderator now, so I'm going to create a game. I am going to create a free tier game, just because that's simple. So now the game is set up. I see there's a game code, 122313. All right, this other window, so pretend this is on a player's computer who is speaking with a different voice. He is going to join the game. The moderator, he gets the game code from the moderator through Zoom chat in the Zoom room. He puts it in there, puts in his name. He joins the room, and there's a big buzzer that you can buzz. So there's actually a sound with that. I don't think I'm sharing sound right now. So you probably couldn't hear it, but it makes a sound both for the player and for the moderator. Go back to the moderator's view. We can see the list of players that buzzed in. I clear the buzzers, go back, player can buzz again. Basically, it works the way you'd expect a website to work. If I told you, it acts like a buzzer system. And that's all it does. But it does it well. And I guess it does do something else, which is it makes an attempt to measure network latency with the players and to correct for it. I don't want to oversell this. It's probably impossible for any software solution to accurately determine which player hit a buzzer after hearing the least amount of a question, even if that's the right standard for who buzzed first. But buzzin.live at least makes an attempt. So if you have fairly regular latency patterns, it ought to do a better job than other solutions in figuring out who had actually buzzed first. Probably there are some of you out there saying, this looks like a pain, having this separate website that you set up. And, I can't honestly say that it's not a pain. But we've tested this a lot, tested different ways to buzz in, and players have been very consistent in providing feedback that playing with a site like buzzin.live makes the game feel more natural, makes it feel more like buzzing in, and works better for the moderator who is controlling the room. So that's basically the evidence that I can then lay in front of you, which we wouldn't recommend this if we hadn't tried it a lot and said that this site or a similar buzzing site really is the way to go. So you saw that I created a free room there. There are also premium rooms. Free rooms are free, but they're limited to 8 participants. So for NAQT standard Quiz Bowl, that's in theory fine. Lots and lots of tournaments use the free rooms without problems. For my local events, I pay for premium rooms so that the alternates can be in the room ready to go in case they get subbed in. And also so that the scorekeeper in each room can join the game and observe the buzzing as well. Premium keys that last a day cost 99 cents. And you can get ones that last longer at a considerable discount. So for scoring, NAQT has developed a online score sheets, which are basically just Google Sheets for use by the scorekeeper. And I'm going to pull up one that I created just before this began. Essentially, a scorekeeper would go to the master score sheet, make a local copy in their Google repository, and then for each round that they're going to run, they simply duplicate the blank score sheet tab, rename it something useful like round 1, and then they keep score on it. So you'll see the score sheet that looks very similar to a standard NAQT score sheet, except there are some places that are garishly red. Everything red on the score sheet is an issue that needs to be addressed. So I need to fill out the event. So this is the webinar tournament. It is round 1. The moderator is me. And so who are the teams? Well, let's say I have Tech A on the left and East B on the right. And now I can fill in the scores. Let's say this team gets the first toss-up. Oh, okay, I got a toss-up without entering a player name. So that's Ted. All right, they got the toss-up. They got the first bonus, didn't get the next bonus. You got that bonus. We can see 20 bonus points, 30 for the question, cumulative score of 30. Over here, now they get a question. Now they get a question. Got to remember to fill in my player names. And over on the right, we can see that the score sheet notices that both teams have answered toss-up 1. So I will move this down. And broadly speaking, this is how it works. You enter 10s, -5s, 15s. The score is tracked for you. You put in bonus parts. That's all there is to it. I do want to emphasize that this is not does not centrally aggregate the scores. All right, so the question here is there a template of that score sheet available for tournament hosts to copy and use? I'm going to mash that up with the next question, which is where do you find the score sheets? In the online tournament guide, under the scorekeeper tab, the one that details the jobs that scorekeepers have to do, there is a link to the master score sheet. So with instructions there that basically the scorekeeper navigates there, and then they make a copy to make a local copy. Do you need one buzzin.live key for each room? If you're doing premium keys, yes, you need 1 key for each room. So if you're running 20 rooms, you need 20 keys. So these score sheets are not a central stats system. They don't like aggregate wins and losses and compute points per toss-up heard for all of the teams. You still need a statistician who is using SQBS or something like that to compile the stats. This is just a system for entering data in a game room as the game is being played by a scorekeeper who might be 1,000 miles away from the players or the moderators. All right, online question system. So the online question system is NAQT's attempt to simultaneously make life easier on online moderators who are reading games, and to make life easier on tournament directors who need to distribute questions to moderators, but without creating a situation in which there are hundreds of PDF copies of rounds of questions that need to be secure floating around the internet. So the basic idea is that the system lets people who are signed up to staff a particular tournament sign into our website, start a game, and then be stepped through a round of questions in the exact order that you are supposed to read them. And while doing that, it tracks the questions that were heard by both teams. I think this is probably something that is, of everything in this webinar, this is the most helped out by my showing instead of telling. So I'm going to do my best to show you how this works. So I am now a moderator going to staff my first tournament. I go to my staffing page on the NAQT site, which would also be linked if I had just logged in. All right, well, so I'm sort of special in that I've listed the staffer on a ton of tournaments, but the one that I want is the webinar tournament. So normally you would see like one listing here because you're probably not moderating for a whole bunch of tournaments. Click the control room, and as a moderator, what I want to do is start a game. Sure, I'll read a game in round 2. I will use the default packets for that round. I am reading Oak Grove Academy A and Oak Grove Academy B. I use those teams. I start the game. And now clicking this button is what marks the game as actually officially started. And here's the first cycle of questions. Here's the toss-up, which I would read. And then if a team gets it right, here's the bonus. So the idea behind the system is that a moderator needs only to click once on each page to keep going, which seems like a little bit maybe like overkill in the name of efficiency when you're just looking at a web page in isolation. But when you're doing this and have the score sheet and have buzzin.live and have Zoom open, the idea is just to minimize the amount of mousing and clicking that you have to do what you need. So if the toss-up is red, but no one gets it right, I click red, but no bonus earned. Then here's cycle 2, toss-up and bonus. In this case, let's say the toss-up was red, and so the bonus was also red, toss-up and bonus red. And then, so obviously this would be going much more slowly if I were actually reading these questions and keeping score and doing everything else that a moderator is supposed to do. But it will go through the entire packet. And because my tournament has been configured as using games of 20 toss-up cycles, then as soon as I say what's happened for the 20th cycle, the system tells me that I've completed the normal number of question cycles, so I should conclude the game. But if overtime is required, then you can continue with the additional questions in the packet to do overtime. I'm going to say game is done. So here I could immediately start another game, or I can explore some of the other options that are available. These are not so exciting, but you can see the packets. You can see the rules that NAQT thinks you're using. Oh, actually, this reminds me. When you set up your tournament with NAQT, the whole point of the system is to display the questions to the moderators in the easiest possible way, exactly what they need to read when they need to read it. And so for that, we need to know how your tournament is going to run. And obviously the set I just stepped through right there is using NAQT's standard format, toss-ups and bonuses that are paired. The system is also set up to understand the custom packets that we write for state formats for areas where we are the official provider. And we support a number of alternative rules that we know are common ways of playing Quiz Bowl, even though they deviate from NAQT's rules. But when you set up your tournament with us, you should just clarify what rules you're using so that we can make sure we have the tournament set up so the questions are displayed in the proper way. Rounds let you configure how the tournament is set up. And then, well, actually for status reports, this is the new tab. This is the control room for my namesake tournament that I ran 3 weeks ago. That if you look as the status, you can see the current status of every staffer in your tournament, what game they're reading, the round they're on, the packets they're on, the teams that are playing, and so on. You can see the status for every team, like their most recent game. And you can see a record for every game that's been read as part of the tournament. And so these status pages were built after my first tournament to partly address my concern of not really knowing what was going on throughout there with all my moderators. And now I can't use this to communicate with them, but I can at least see if a player reports to me and says, hey, we've been waiting a long time to get into room 12, I can look and I can see that room 12 is now on, say, cycle 19 out of 20. And I can tell them, yes, that room was delayed, but they are almost done. Just hang out a few more minutes. Let's see. Oh, so one thing that is different about the online question system is that as a tournament director, you need to specify your staffers in advance. Not necessarily a huge amount in advance, but everyone who's staffing needs to have an account on NAQT. And ideally, they will have gone through the tutorial tournament just to get an idea of what's going on. But you have full control over your staffing. You add a staffer by entering their email address. So if it's the morning of the tournament and somebody doesn't show up and you need to substitute somebody else in, you can just enter their address. You don't have to wait for NAQT to approve them or anything like that. It's a quick change to add somebody. You can add them part of the way through your tournament. It's adding staffers is pretty easy. The slow part is that they need to have an NAQT account. Those are free and quick to make, but it's something that needs to be done. Ideally, this would all be set up before your tournament so that people have time to make an account, people have time to do the tutorial, and if they haven't used their NAQT.com account in a while, they can remember what their password is or get it reset or just make sure that they can access things. So one question I was asked in advance is if you're using the online question system for the moderators to get questions, how do teams get the questions after the tournament? And the answer to that is Lock Lizard, that after a tournament finishes and we get the results in the list of participating teams, we just put the encrypted PDF copies of the questions used at the tournament into their study libraries. And this just happens automatically. So everyone who attended your tournament, shortly after you send us the results, if they go to their online library, they will see the questions from your tournament there. They don't show up until your tournament is done, and they don't show up until we have gotten the results, or at any rate, a team list, because we need to know who is at the tournament so we know to whom they should be delivered. Let's see. Does each moderator in the different rooms need their own control room? So if this is referring to the control room for the online question system, that is sort of an overarching concept that is shared by the entire tournament. That every tournament has its online control room that's going to display basically the same data to everyone who's in there. Although obviously if you're a moderator, you have your own games and you're seeing the questions for that game. Will coaches still have access to the questions from the matches for future practice use after the tournament? Yes, they will be put in your Lock Lizard library. Do I recommend that a moderator use more than one screen for everything you see and track? Yeah, honestly, yes. Having multiple monitors makes this easier. There can be a lot of windows, and it can be convenient to have them larger and not overlapping. So yeah, if you have access to multiple monitors or some huge monitor or something like that, yes, I recommend that. But I don't say that it is necessary. I've moderated a lot of games on my laptop screen where I have Zoom and the score sheet and buzzin.live and the moderator chat and the online question system open. It's cramped. It's not great. It takes some getting used to, but you can make it work. There's actually a screenshot of how I moderate in the online tournament guide under the moderator page that just shows how I arrange windows when I moderate. Will it work for everybody? I don't know, but it has worked for me. How long does the tutorial take? So if starting from the point of making an account and clicking through and saying it, I'd say like 5 minutes, maybe. You don't actually have to read the questions. Really, it's just getting used to the idea of I'm going to click one of these buttons. Either they didn't hear the toss up, so they didn't hear the bonus, so it's the top button, or both, so it's the bottom button. And then at the end, remember to click conclude game. That's honestly the biggest problem we have with people is they don't click conclude game, which doesn't really affect anything. It just makes it harder for us to compile statistics. How do we submit the score sheets to the tournament stats people in each tournament? When you create your set of score sheets at the beginning, you just use the Google Sheets feature to share with the statistician. So the tournament director will have given you the email address of whoever the statistician is. You just share it with them at the beginning of the tournament, and then they will just process them as they get to them, as they go through. All right, a couple of quick things for tournament directors running online tournaments that are different from in-person tournaments. It's very easy for teams to find multiple tournaments using the same question set now that they're online. So you really need to emphasize in your announcement and maybe even a special email to teams to say, we're using set, if it's an NAQT set, say Invitational Series 200, make sure you're not attending any other tournament and you're not planning to attend any other tournament that is using that set. Be very explicit about your audio and visual requirements. If you are requiring video feeds, which I recommend, and it's necessary for your tournament to be a qualifier for NAQT Nationals, make sure everyone understands that. Every time you list a time in your announcement, stick the time zone on it. It's very easy to forget that you might have teams coming from further away or moderators who are not local. And it's very common for teams to show up at the wrong time because they just don't think about it. Be very explicit about the time zone in everything that you send out. Double staff your game rooms. For in-person tournaments, I often cheaped out as a local tournament director and tried to get by with one staffer. Broadly speaking, if you had experienced staffers, that worked well. They can read and keep score at the same time. For online tournaments, yes, people can do it, but it takes longer, and it takes even longer than it takes longer with in-person events. And there's a lot more to do. It is really worth it trying to find enough people that you can double staff your game rooms. I would place a much higher emphasis on that than I would for an typical in-person event. Playing around with the digital score sheet, can bonus questions be split, as in stealing, getting an error message? So that sheet that I showed you is for NAQT's format, where it would be evidence of an impropriety to have both teams scoring bonus points on a question. We do not right now have a score sheet that is set up to allow split bonus points, but that would be easy to create. And I will try to remember to put one of those together and make it available. For formats that use a directed round with questions that bounce back, like the VHL format, do you have any suggestions for best practice for this format for online play? So if it's a question of seeing the questions, the online question system is set up to display those properly. It'll display the directed question for each team, and you can cycle through the 10 of those. If the question is about a score sheet, clearly the NAQT score sheet wouldn't work very well in that case. I think that, well, what the heck? I'm the CTO. I can promise that I will work with our other guys to put together an appropriate online score sheet, maybe with feedback from the VHSL administrators that would work if they don't already have something in the works. All right, last thing is eliminate contingent rounds from your schedule. What I mean by a contingent round is a round that may or may not take place depending on what has happened in the tournament. So what would that be? Tiebreakers and placement games. That these are all very natural things, and there's good reasons to have them, but they always take longer to organize online, and only a few teams are playing them. And since you're offering fewer rounds, it's usually just not a great trade-off, in my opinion. And yes, you can point to all places all over NAQT's site where it trumpets its tiebreaker policy of you can't be eliminated from title contention by a statistical tiebreaker. We still believe in that, but for online tournaments, at least in the current state of the game, we are stepping back from that philosophy, and we are saying statistical tiebreakers are defensible because they allow more teams to get in more games. And they also allow the tournament to have a more definite schedule when you know whether each game is going to occur or not. So teams have a better idea when they need to be, where they need to be, when, and there's just less of a chance of communication backfiring. So, you know, can you use tiebreakers and placement games and games like that? Sure, but they're going to require more work. And NAQT says, especially for your early tournaments, keep it simple. Have a fixed schedule. And if you need to break ties to go into the playoffs or whatever, decide it on points per toss-up herd or whatever you think is appropriate. All right, we are getting down to the end. The last section I have on my outline is the rules. And again, this is pretty short because the rules are basically the same. NAQT, in a change from 20 years of practice, recommends untimed games of 20 cycles or 18 or 16 or whatever you think is appropriate for your time constraints for the online tournament. Basically, we don't have an awesome way to incorporate the clock into all of the windows you're already using. And as painful as it was, we decided that it wasn't worth integrating a clock via one more thing for people to keep track of. It has a lot of value. We're certainly not backing away from the clock in principle for in-person tournaments going forward. But right now, with the tools available, we say play your online games untimed. For bonuses, all right, this is such a tiny thing, but for bonuses, the team should deliver their answer by specifically prefacing it by saying, our answer is. So they can talk about it for as much time as they want. When they actually give their answer, they say, our answer is Jefferson, or our answer is color purple, or whatever. You'll think it's ridiculous that I emphasize this that much. How can it make a difference? It makes an enormous difference. We had all sorts of problems in our playtesting games with moderators unable to discern subtle differences in volume and direction and cadence that distinguished conferring on bonus answers from actually giving a bonus answer. Adding this our answer is cleared things up immediately. It was night and day. I highly, highly recommend making this the policy for your tournament. Yeah, if you're from an activities association, I really hope you trust me on this and can incorporate this as an official or an unofficial part of your rules or your guidelines or whatever it takes. It solves a lot of problems with evaluating bonus answers. That brings me to the end of the topics that I wanted to make sure that I talked about. So the three key points of games taking longer, communication being key, audio quality being paramount. I guess I got those out of order, but it doesn't really matter. They're all important. Overviewing the various bits of technology that we recommend: Zoom, buzzin.live, Google Sheets, and then the online question system. So that sort of brings the formal webinar to an end. I'm going to go through some of the questions that were submitted in advance. And for at least a bit, if there are questions that continue to come in through the Q&A system, I will attempt to answer those as well. I wanted to thank you all for taking time to come and listen to this, and also for stepping up to try to keep Quiz Bowl alive during this year. I think that is really critically important, and we are so happy that there has been so much interest in this webinar from people who will be running tournaments and are dedicated to providing the players with the best possible experience. How do I add moderators? What if I don't know them until the day of? I guess I didn't actually demonstrate this, but as a tournament director, you'll have a page that lists the staff for the tournament, and there'll be a box for an email address. You enter the email address of someone new, click enter, they'll be added. You can also give specific staffers what's called TD access or tournament director access that will give them additional powers to go in and fiddle with other moderators' games and also add staffers themselves. You can also remove staffers. I mean, you can sort of manipulate staffers the way you'd expect to be able to. What if you don't know them until the day of? I think that's not ideal, but it works. If someone shows up and says, hey, I'm going to moderate, you're like, fine, what's your email address? Put them in the system. 2 seconds later, they can sit down, log into the NAQT site, join the, and go start a game in their room. But it really will work better if you identify them in advance and give them time to make accounts and remember their password and do the tutorial system. Are there any special steps to take about communicating with teams after an online event? I would say there's nothing that's absolutely critical, But I would follow up with them and specifically ask about how the event went in terms of it being online. Did there was the communication clear? Was the schedule clear? Were they ever confused about what they were supposed to be doing? And then take that feedback to heart. I guess maybe let teams know they'll get the questions via Lock Lizard. If they haven't already signed up to have a study library at NAQT, they can. It's free. Every single tournament they've ever played or their school has ever played or they bought a practice material will be in there. All that at no additional charge. Any tips on the division of labor between moderator and scorekeeper? I would say that the only real question there is who handles buzzin.live. And I think the most common answer to that is the moderator handles it, and that is definitely my preference as a moderator. I know some moderators at in-person tournaments like to have the scorekeeper administer the buzzer system. I don't know if they would have that same preference at an online event. I guess the moderator and scorekeeper should just work that out. I can't think of any technical reason why the scorekeeper would not be able to administer the buzz-in room, but I think it would be easier for the moderator to do that. Oh, okay. Do you require kids to have a webcam and be seen? All right. So speaking of the tournaments that I run, and in accordance with the online tournament guide, yes, kids have to have a webcam and it needs to basically show their face. And that is a requirement if a tournament is going to be a qualifier for an NAQT National Championship. Are there tournaments out there that don't require a webcam? Yes, absolutely. Why do I require a webcam? I and NAQT believe that it is an effective anti-cheating measure. Most of the accusations and suspicions of cheating at online games that have been brought to our attention have involved players who did not have a webcam on and were therefore free to sort of do whatever they wanted without looking incongruous or suspicious through the channel. So ultimately, I'd say this is up to you, but I think it is important, very important, to have every player on a video stream. Oh, one of my colleagues points out that there is a technical problem to having the scorekeeper administer the buzzin.live room, and that is if you're using a free room, the scorekeeper just can't do it. You would need to have a premium room if you wanted the scorekeeper to do it, and that is true. But still, I say have the moderator do it. That feels natural to me. Are the kids listed on the score sheet in advance, and are those names what the moderator uses to admit people from the waiting room? The kids are not listed on the score sheet in advance. It doesn't. It's not sophisticated enough to go to NAQT's site and get registration data, and in fact, tournaments are not required to use our online registration system at all. So it proceeds similar to the way an in-person tournament does. When players are in the room, the scorekeeper can look at their Zoom names and just write those down. And it's also not what the moderator uses to admit people. Basically, the moderator, I tell my moderators to admit everybody, and when they show up, then just sort of quickly verify that people are in the right place. And essentially, teams will figure this out pretty quickly. When a player shows up and is in the wrong place, they'll notice that they don't know that none of their teammates is there and their coach isn't there. Or the other people in the room will say, hey, are you sure you're supposed to be in this room? So basically, the moderator can admit everybody between games, and in my experience, it gets itself sorted out pretty quickly. Question about the score sheets. When I add bonus points to Team B when Team A got the toss-up, does the score sheet tell me something is wrong? Yes, I believe that it does. Oh, premium rooms allow alternates and coaches to be in the room during the competition. Correct. So we're talking about a buzzin.live premium room here. Yes, premium rooms can have like up to 200 people or something like that. So yes, you can have all the players and all of the alternates and the coaches and the scorekeeper, and everybody else can be logged in and observe the buzzing order. Oh, this is a good question. How many folks do I suggest be in the control room to handle and manage a tournament and all it takes to go smoothly? That's a good question. It's going to be heavily experience dependent. When I run a tournament, my goal, if I can do it, is to have 5 people in the control room. One is me, who is going to handle any unexpected problems that show up. One is my statistician. One is an alternate moderator that I have on hand in case something goes wrong with a room or a moderator gets disconnected. I can hastily set up a replacement room and shepherd people into that room while trying to figure out what happened with the original moderator. A scorekeeper to be paired with that other moderator, and then an extra person to be assigned as a scorekeeper or just as an extra pair of eyes. Sad to say that, if a moderator reports someone acting suspiciously during the game, I will then assign this person to watch their games and just see if anything looks strange during that. I'm not always so lucky as to have 5 extra people, but that is my goal. I don't, with a non-complicated schedule, I don't find that I need extra people to manage teams. Okay, I think that I have emptied the packet of questions, and like in a match, that brings this to an end. Thanks again for coming. I hope to see some of you next Sunday. And if you have additional feedback, please don't hesitate to contact NAQT. We would love to hear it. Have a great night and a wonderful weekend.